Okay, so I'm going to start this session off of talking a little bit about Crossref's strategic outlook, and yeah, it's pretty good. So, okay, thanks. I will. No. So I did want to touch on this because this is something that as Doreen mentioned earlier, in talking about all the changes that are happening in not only scholarly communications and research and the wider world, looking forward strategically is very important for all organizations. And so Crossref has been doing some work on this, and so I was just going to report a little bit about what we've been doing and what the Crossref board has been doing over the last 6 months or so, and how that's then factored into some of our plans for 2018. So first of all, with all the change going on, we decided to use scenario planning as the basis for our strategic planning. And scenario planning is a process, a particular methodology where you challenge your assumptions and beliefs and try to open up your thinking and looking outside sort of normal structures. And so you do this by developing scenarios about the future. So you don't try to predict the future, but you create stories and about possible futures. And then from that very broad brush view, you then look at strategies that can help in any of those different scenarios. And then you need some flexibility, obviously, going forward, depending on how things develop and which of those possible scenarios might actually happen. So. And it also looks at issues around things that are outside our control and recognizing that we're not going to know everything. And there are external forces that we can't control. And so we took a look at that environment as part of the scenario planning process. And we've been hearing about some of that today in our different talks about changes in technology and things that are happening in consumer technology that have impacts on our community, but that we don't necessarily control. So the first step we did was we interviewed board members and staff members and some other people from the community, and we developed a set of distilled some distinctive competencies for Crossref, and a distinctive competency is what an organization does better than anyone else that's not easily replicated. And so the few that came up for Crossref were our reputation as a trusted, neutral, one-stop resource, and that's something that we've developed a transparent and trusted relationship with the scholarly communications community, and so obviously this we want to keep this, but we also have to evolve this, and how can we apply this reputation in service of improved scholarly communication. Another thing was managing scholarly communications infrastructure through technical knowledge and innovation. So we manage some infrastructure that have solved a wide range of problems for our members and for others, and so we can recognize that, but also realize that obviously maintaining that is critical as well, and won't necessarily be easy. And convening and facilitating scholarly communication community collaboration, and we can convene and facilitate in areas that require collaboration across publishing and scholarly communications. And again, we've touched on a few of those here today, and we're going to be hearing a little bit about the Organization Identifier Project in a bit more detail next. The next thing we did then was look at areas of critical uncertainties. Okay, so these are things that are shaping our environment, not necessarily things that we can control, but things that we need to be aware of and think about. So we had a list of I think we had 12 critical uncertainties, so I've listed them here, so it'd be interesting to see. Obviously, some of these might resonate with you, and these are things that are impacting a lot of different organizations in different sectors. And for instance, you can dive down into detail on any of these, and of course one of them is publisher sustainability. Will organizations and stakeholders in scholarly communications be able to develop sustainable new business models before existing models are disrupted? And as an association, how do we balance encouraging innovation with supporting existing models of our members, because we have such a diverse range of members with many different types of business models. As things change, if some organizations start to lose out, how do we manage that, and how does that affect Crossref? So we had the set of critical uncertainties that were the starting point for the board discussions. So here are the second set. How are things changing in prestige and recognition in terms of where you publish? Rise of preprint and new content sources. Again, we've heard about that today. It's something Crossref with preprints and peer review reports, something that's already happening. We had the impact of open, and we considered the multiple flavors of open. So open access, open data, open science, open source. They're all transforming research and scholarly communications, and it's going to have a huge impact. All of those things are going to have a huge impact going forward. And of course, quality and accuracy of content, but also quality and accuracy of metadata. Again, something that we've touched on a lot. So over a day and a half, with the facilitator, the Crossref board considered our distinctive competencies. We looked at all these critical uncertainties and had breakout groups and came up with a number of different scenarios. I won't report on all those different scenarios about how things may play out over even the next 5 to 10 years, but it's very interesting when you start to look at how these things might play out. But from that, we distilled down a couple of key strategic themes, and we've factored those into the Crossref budget for next year, and this is an ongoing process. So the board's meeting tomorrow, and there's going to be an update on what we discussed in July, and so this isn't something that's fixed, but it's something that's we're going to keep working on. So a key area was expand the constituencies that Crossref deals with. This is something we've already started to do, but there was a sense of accelerating this, that collaborating and working with funders and funder engagement is very important. So we have a number of activities there in terms of a funder advisory group and looking at grant identifiers. International outreach is very important, and we heard about that. Member compliance, and we've talked about participation reports. An interesting area here is editor outreach, because many times we find when we're talking to publishers, we're often talking to the production department or the technology people dealing with the online hosting of content. And sometimes as we get more into issues of provenance or corrections and retractions, say with Crossmark, often there's a big editorial component of this, and often we don't engage with those people within our member organizations. So that's something that we're thinking about. Engaging researchers directly, this is something that we're starting slow and building up. We engage with a lot of researchers who are more technical in building systems and tools, but there's of course a much wider range of researchers. The focus at the moment really is around people developing things around the Crossref, the REST API. But Crossref staff are doing this maybe more on an individual level. Another key area is, of course, improving metadata. We are looking at putting some focus on Crossmark and improvements and updates to Crossmark. We're looking at the issue of a standard Crossref widget that would go, so similarly to how Crossmark works, where there's actually an icon that you click on and something pops up, there could be a generic widget that would be applied to anything that has a Crossref DOI. the relationship taxonomy that Crossref has started to develop is very, very important. Quality control and metadata validation. We've got a huge range of things that we're doing there, an interesting one is a public feedback channel for metadata issues that can feed back into our metadata pipeline. It kind of happens now. I mean, people contact us sometimes noticing when metadata isn't correct, and there could be feedback. But it can be some automated feedback too. But the improved integration with external systems is a key area too, and that's again to try to automate things and not always have it rely on manual correction. Then in terms of the support for the scholarly map, building on relationships that are internal, there's lots of new content types, new identifiers, the org ID registry that are going to be very important for us next year. Third area, simplify and enrich our services. So the key areas we're working on there are onboarding new members, more proactive education, especially again internationally for smaller publishers, and plans for a support and community forum. We're looking at a member center. We're putting a lot of focus on the member experience, starting now and going into next year, and also looking at better metadata deposit through our metadata manager tool, and a number of different enhancements there, and integration again with OJS, the Open Journal System, which many small publishers use. And we heard about the Metadata Plus service, and event data is still in beta, but next year, maybe later in the year, there might be a similar type of Plus service there, SLA-based service for event data. And then we're also looking at the partnerships and with external providers that some of our services rely on. So looking at similarity check, our citation lookup with INERA, and the Open Funder Registry, where we work with Elsevier. So on the back-end data for the registry, and so we just always keep those in mind, and how are they working, and can there be improvements that we make in those areas. And then fourth is the collaborate and partner with others. We already do a lot of this, and so the real issue here is because there's so much and so many possibilities, it's really about prioritizing what we do. And we are a DOI registration agency, and so working on the International DOI Foundation governance and the future of that organization. There are currently 9 registration agencies, or 9 other ones than Crossref, and that's developing in interesting ways. And we work with all the other registration agencies in different ways. We have a couple of community things that have already started or we're thinking of, Metadata 2020, but also what we're thinking of as an emerging publisher education coalition. So possibly working with other groups, INASP or DOAJ, and again, looking at collaborating with organizations about best practices for smaller publishers. And we collaborate and work on many community initiatives, sometimes with other associations. There are a number of activities that we're engaged with STM and RDA and Counter. And we also work very closely with a number of things where Crossref isn't particularly leading these things, but we participate and work with these organizations. And so, of course, ORCID, NLM, and PubMed in Europe, PMC, Chorus, DataCite, PKP, who run the OJS and develop the OJS system. And so we have a whole range of activities that we've sort of aligned under these key themes that came out of the strategic scenario planning. And what was interesting, also picking up on one of the themes, of course, that came up was the impact of machine learning and AI, and some of the talks we've heard today have addressed that. So that's an area that Crossref is looking at, and we do lots of things kind of below the radar where we're talking to people, and we might do investigations in different areas. So that's all going to continue next year. So that was a whirlwind tour over some of the strategic priorities that Crossref has, and as the board continues to work and discuss its strategic scenarios, we'll come back in future to the members in different ways to report on and update on the progress of that work. So thank you very much, and feel free to applaud, and happy to take any questions.
Hi. So one of your key areas of uncertainty was machine learning and artificial intelligence, and I wondered what it was about that you obviously we know it's a thing. We're seeing more and more amazing applications of it every day. What is it that you are particularly uncertain about?
So I think that we're looking out. If you're looking out, well, it's hard to predict, but let's say you're looking out 5 to 10 years. There was some discussion about, well, does it replace the need for publishers, or does it replace, do journals go away? Looking at some bigger and major shifts, what might happen with peer review if say humans aren't involved as much or at all with peer review. So one of the contexts was, would Crossref be needed? And really thinking of some of those possibilities in those terms. And so I think we looked at it really as looking at, would publishers even be around? Or obviously those roles might happen, but not being done by the current organizations who are doing them, or how might that impact on Crossref itself? And so I think the main thing with that was looking a little farther out, and in the shorter term, maybe there's a lot more very positive things that are happening there, but maybe some unease with some of the longer term trends, or those uncertainties about the direction where it's all heading.
Sure. Thank you.